Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Nation Building. On our program, we examine the political, social, and the moral issues in the leadership of the Bahamas. On our program today, we are taking a break from politics, believe it or not, and we are talking about spiritual values. Specifically, we're highlighting the work of Bahamas Faith Ministries International and its impact on the country. As the nation knows, unfortunately a few years ago, the founder and visionary of that ministry passed away untimely, and the ministry has grown and continued to impact the country through another visionary pastor who took over the mantle. And so we're pleased to welcome to the program, when we get back from this break, the new leader of Bahamas Faith Ministries International.
The concierge service is the best thing ever. Like, it is so fabulous, especially for someone like me where I cannot leave my office, my job, to go do anything in the middle of the day because I'm on the radio. The service was so fabulous. The ladies gave me a call, they set up an appointment, they come with their professional looking attire, they're just so cute, and they come here, and it was a great experience. It took 20 minutes to switch over to the Alive service. It was simple, it was easy, and they just made me feel so welcomed. They explained everything. They hooked me up with my new phone, they gave me my data package, as you can see, hey. And it was fabulous. It was a wonderful service, but what I really liked best about it was not only did they come here and make it easy for me, but they continued to check up on me. The next day, they made sure that everything was working properly with the phone. I didn't have any issues. The following week, they contacted me again, and I've built a relationship with them. They've continued to check up on me. I feel like I'm part of the Alive family. It's amazing.
Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and I'm here today with the new, well, not so new, president of Bahamas Faith Ministries International, and the person of Dr. Dave Borrows. Pastor Dave, welcome back to Nation Building.
My pleasure.
You've been here before,
yeah.
And we had a very interesting and lively discussion leading, I believe, up to the elections of 2017 in our country. Today, though, we have a more important thing that we're going to focus on, which is the ministry that you lead. We're looking back at the impact of the ministry on the country, and it's well noted in our country's history, the impact of that ministry from a spiritual point of view and socially as well on the Bahamas. And so today, in this opening segment, we want to share with the country a little, for those who might not know, how the ministry got started and became such a dynamic force to the point where it has impacted churches across the country, near and far. So let's jump right in, and let me first of all ask you, the founders of the church, can you say to the nation who started the ministry and how did this whole process begin?
Well, the visionary of the ministry was Dr. Miles Monroe. And when he returned home from college, he had this plan that he had put together about starting a ministry. And I attended ORU as well. Pastor Richard attended ORU, and Pastor Henry was his brother-in-law. And so he called us together, and he shared the vision with us, and he asked us if we would join him. And after each of us reviewed the vision, we all decided, yes, we're on board.
Just like that?
Yeah, well, the thing about it is, Dr. Monroe always wrote everything down with details. He had details about how many people were coming, what was going to happen, all of that type of stuff. And I didn't grow up in church, so to speak. I grew up as a little boy in church, but I had left the church, and I wasn't really interested in church as I knew it. And because I had been exposed to the type of worship that he was talking about and some of the things that he was talking about, it was exciting for me. And Pastor Richard, having also been exposed to ORU, he was on board right away.
And that is Dr. Richard Pinder you're referring to?
Yeah, Dr. Richard Pinder. So everybody was on board from the beginning.
So he sold a good vision to you all.
Oh yeah, we were excited about it. I mean, the things that he outlined to us, everybody was excited.
So the founders of the church, as you recall, in that initial stages, you then, how long did it take from the inception of sharing that vision to actually start meeting, and where did you meet?
I don't remember the exact time lapse between initiation and begin meeting, but I know that it was within a few months of that initial meeting that we actually started the meeting. So he shared the vision, and then we talked about getting a meeting place to start a Bible study. It wasn't a church. The idea wasn't to have a church at that time. It was just a Bible study. So we located a facility on Prince Charles Drive. It was an old wash house, laundromat. And so we located that, and I think it was about 7 of us who began the ministry. So we started meeting for Bible studies on Friday nights. After a period of a few months, it grew rapidly. And as it grew, we knew that we needed a new location. In fact, we ended up being given an ultimatum to move from the location that we were at, but we were already outgrowing it. So we moved to Bay Street in where they used to have Tropical Shipping, the building right there, Rubens, where Rubens was. And we met there for a while, and then we moved to what would have been the Balmoral Beach Hotel. In the process of that time, we began formulating the paperwork for the ministry. So we had a vision, we were meeting, we had a Bible study, but there was no official documents. As we began to grow rapidly, we saw the need to incorporate an entity. The interesting thing about it is, when we were talking about incorporating an entity, Dr. Monroe said at the beginning, he said, look, I don't want a church. He said, it will involve a church, but I don't want a church. So we developed a proposal for a nonprofit entity that involved a church, but it wasn't a church. So it was called Bahamas Faith Ministries International. And there was no mention of a church in the name initially. And that's why a lot of people get confused when you would say sometimes, okay, you're a president, you're a senior pastor. Well, actually, there's 2 entities. You have BFMI, the nonprofit, and then you have Bahamas Faith Ministries Fellowship, which is the church.
Interesting. The church, as I recall, and history, many say was a forerunner to religious tourism. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely, because we began meeting in the hotel. We attracted a lot of people from the hotel and all kinds of people. And then we began bringing in guests for conferences and seminars. I don't think conferences or seminars, international conferences and seminars, were that popular back then. So
not at all.
We were the precursor to religious tourism.
Absolutely. Now, the ministry, I know you may not recall the exact timeline, but as best as you can, from the formation at the wash house to the hotel, rough estimates of the numbers that ended up forcing you to go to the hotel was about what, and the period, if you recall, was about?
I think within 3 months of being at the wash house, we moved from 7 to about 50 people. And then when we moved to Bay Street, we moved from about 50 to 100. And that was another period of months. I don't think it was more than maybe 5-6 months. When we moved to the hotel, we grew from 100 to about maybe 300 within a period of about 2 years. And I think by the time as we left the hotel, we might have been as high as 400. And then we moved to Marquis Street. And from Marquis Street, we grew from 400 to about maybe 900. 1,000.
Marquis Street was a turning point, wasn't it?
It was.
The impact of many of the young people who are leaders in various segments of the country now, in politics and other areas, joined the ministry. If I'm not a lot, if not most of them, a significant amount of them joined the ministry at Marquis Street, and was impacted then. What was your role at that time?
From the initiation of the ministry, I functioned as an assistant pastor and specifically as the leader of the youth ministry. So I was the youth pastor. I formed the youth ministry at BFM and I led as youth pastor. I was also a member of the board of directors and a part of the pastoral team. So that was my role.
And some have said, those who have been impacted by the ministry, that the ministry that you led in particular, but the church in general, but the ministry you led was the greatest, if not the greatest, one of the greatest force to impact socially the young gangbangers, if you will, of the country at the time. In a minute, what was the dynamism? What is it that was unique about what you did in leading that ministry to cause that impact in the 90s?
Well, it's quite interesting how Bahamas Faith Ministries developed. You know, Dr. Monroe was a tremendous visionary. And I came into the picture, basically, I always say that I was an outlaw. I said when we started out with 3 preachers and a gangster. And so I didn't understand church terminology and church methodology, but I had an experience where my life had changed. And so I decided to go out and reach people like me. And that took me to the streets, that took me to the parks.
Familiar territory.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I began by going into some of the worst areas in Nassau and picking up guys who were gangbangers, drug dealers, bank robbers, and, you know, routinely taking them with
What
me.
made you comfortable doing a thing like that?
Well, these were my friends.
So you were a part of that community before?
Yeah, I was I was a graduate of the University of Warren Street.
Okay, interesting. And I guess in a nutshell, having been there caused you to be impactful because you understood the culture there, and you. Moving fast along in the limited time we have, when the unfortunate events of November 2014 occurred, where the visionary and senior pastor and founder Dr. Monroe passed away along with Pastor Richard Pinder, say to the nation how, in that crucial period of transition, how smooth or difficult is it? And I say this in this context. You find that transfer of leadership, whether it's political or spiritual, goes through some difficult times when there is a passing or sudden passing, or even when there's a retirement of a person at the helm. So share with the country how difficult, how challenging that was, how smooth the transition was, if it was.
Well, I always tell people, you know, when I got the news of the crash, if you go into the dictionary and you look for a definition of shock, you'll see that picture. I tell you, it was a tremendous shock. I mean, absolutely tremendous shock. And it was very difficult because, you know, we had been together so many years. Our team had been together. We had great plans for the future. The ministry had become a global ministry. Dr. Monroe was probably the most recognized Bahamian in the world at that time. And so it was a tremendous shock. It was tremendously difficult, but what made it easy in terms of transition is that we were all taught to be leaders. We came from a ministry whose motto was transforming followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change. So I was a leader in my own right. All of us were leaders in our own right, all of the leaders of Bahamas Faith Ministries, and we could all handle a church or an organization if it became necessary. I had traveled with Dr. Monroe. We had been partners for many, many years. I knew the vision, I knew him, I knew the ministry. And so at that time, the way I looked at it was almost like I was there when the baby was born, and now the baby's parents are no longer here, so I'm the parent.
So was that something that arbitrarily you decided you wanted to do, or was it a board of directors that said that they wanted you to serve?
Well, it was one of those things where, you know, you looked around the room and you say, who can carry the vision forward? And who's most familiar with the vision, and who's already in a leadership position. And basically, the board of governors at that time, we all decided together that it would be me. Okay.
Just wanted to provide clarity that you make sure that you didn't usher yourself into leadership, that it was a...
I almost looked at it the way Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane, if there's another way.
So one of the most important questions I have for you that I'm sure the nation will learn from today is, what in the world kept this team of men and women together for all those years in leadership, when the history of our country tells us that you start a ministry or you start an organization and success comes and everybody breaks off starting their own thing? What was the secret to keeping
I think there were two keys. The first key was the power of vision. We all believed in the vision. And so when we had individual differences and challenges, the vision kept us together. I think the second thing that made us a strong team was that we all fellowship together. So for example, in the early days, we would all go fishing with Pastor Jay, and he would take us out on the boat, so we all get together, and then we'll go by Pastor Jay's house and cook up the crawfish or whatever it was. And so we fellowshipped with each other, and it was like a close-knit family.
Good. So we're going to try and do this in less than 2 minutes. The other thing that struck me as I prepared for this was you had a dynamic team together. You did wonderful things together. You took over the work. You're not, you've been doing this for a long time. Is there a plan of transitioning to a younger generation, and what does that look like in terms of time?
Well, there's definitely a transition plan in place, and we've been actively working on it. I can't reveal the details at this time, but
it's my job to ask the questions.
but we do have a transition plan, and there are a number of things that we're working on right now.
Wonderful. Okay. And then the final thing I wanted to talk to you about is as we look to the future, what is it that you think is the more outstanding things that the ministry has a desire of doing? Is there any plans to establish branches of the church in other islands or other places? And if you're looking ahead, what's ahead?
Well, looking ahead, we are looking to strengthen and build on the vision. The vision is so clear that it's not time-stamped. So let's say, for example, you don't say, well, the vision is going to be 50 years. This is a vision that is open-ended. It's very clear where we're going. The timelines and the exact events in between are debatable and movable parts. But the vision is very clear. So we know that, first of all, we are a local church with a global vision. So we know that we are supposed to touch the world. Secondly, we transform followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change. And then the third thing is our message is the message of the kingdom. So those three components drive us forward. Now, how that fleshes out is dependent upon the circumstances at the time, the environment, and the personnel available. But we intend to, there are a number of buildings that we want to build. There are a number of initiatives that we are working on. For example, we are now incorporating global members. So this last year, we had a number of persons who have never been to the Bahamas who went through our membership class, because we have persons who consider themselves members of Bahamas Faith Ministries who are in
other countries.
Yeah, in Iraq, Afghanistan, wow, Madagascar, Gabon, Spain, France.
And some of these places don't speak English.
Absolutely, but I guess they figure out a way.
So let's come back locally in the Bahamas. I know reading somewhere the church has a vision of, I can't recall, is it planting churches in the islands, or is it just having ministry efforts to impact the Bahamas? Because you've really saturated NASA over the 30-something years or 40 years that you've impacted. Is there any plans to impact the rest of the Bahamas in a more tangible way?
Yeah, we do plan to establish other churches, either establish or partner with already established churches. So for example, we have established another campus of Bahamas Faith Ministries in Freeport. We have ministerial affiliations with some churches in other islands, and we have started a network. It's called the International Association of Kingdom Churches and Ministries, and that network is a global network. So we have a number of churches worldwide that we are involved with or fellowship with, or who look to us as a covering.
Wonderful. You're watching Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock. We'll be right back after this break.
Who said you can't get great quality products at an affordable price? If you want the best quality food products at the most affordable prices, you must pick up the Jamaica Bahama brand of fine quality products at your favorite food store. Products like Jamaica Bahama Coconut Water, the most healthy and refreshing drink on the market. Jamaica Bahama Fruit Punch, the only fruit punch in the Bahamas made from real fruit. Jamaica Bahama Coconut Milk, green pigeon peas with coconut milk, condensed milk, kidney beans with coconut milk, corned beef, green pigeon peas, mackerel, and corn. Jamaica Bahama's fine line of products is available at all your favorite food stores and convenience stores nationwide. Telephone 351-8282 in Freeport and 341-4091 in Nassau.
I don't wanna wait. No, no, I don't wanna wait.
Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and we are taking a break from politics today. I wonder who's sad. We are talking today about what is most significant, I believe, in the life of our country, which is spiritual values. And there are any number of churches in the country. I don't know if we can count them. But today we're talking about Bahamas Faith Ministries International, as was mentioned earlier. And we have two of the significant figures, them and their families, that would have been a part of the ministry for more years than I know, but they will introduce themselves and tell you how long they've been serving and been a part of that ministry and the impact that it has had on their lives, their family, and of course the Bahamas. And we're talking to Pastor Cipriana Bethel. Pastor Cip, welcome to Nation Building.
Thank you, good to be
Pastor
here.
Pat Roll.
My pleasure.
Welcome
Thank
to our program. This is a very, very interesting period that our country is going through, and there are many of us who have the privilege to talk to the country that shares the belief and talk to our politicians that the church really is the organization that has the answer. BFM has impacted the Bahamas. There is no question of the transformative impact that the ministry have had. Of course, led in its infancy and the visionary Pastor Dr. Miles Monroe and Dr. Richard Pinder, and now having the privilege to have a younger Pastor Dave Burrows, who has been in youth ministry all these years but now has taken up the mantle. And so wanted you to share a little about the history of the ministry as it impacted your life and your family. And so Pastor, we'll start with the lady first.
Okay.
Pastor, can you share with us, first of all, how did you come into contact with Bahamas Faith Ministry and your role and your late husband's role in?
Well, thank you very much. About 35 years ago, actually my eldest child was probably about 3, and the youngest one at that time was 1. We came into Bahamas Faith Ministry through the invitation, actually, of Dr. Miles Monroe's wife, because we were all schoolmates.
And that is Pastor Ruth Monroe.
Both of us, Pastor Ruth Monroe, but we were all schoolmates at alma mater, Queens College. And so we were invited there. And actually, I left my husband in the other church, and I just went. Was a little rebellious at that time, and he followed. He followed because we wanted something more, and we were able to find that at Bahamas Faith Ministry. And that move has impacted our lives from then to now. We actually understood what they were doing at that particular time, wanting to become change agents in the world that God had called them to. And so we thought that we wanted to be agents of change as well.
And just for the record, your late husband, who was the minister of praise and worship, well renowned in the country, the late Pastor Mark Bethel,
yes,
has been tremendously impactful in his ministry as well.
Yes, he was very impacting whilst he was alive. Of course, he learned a lot from Dr. Monroe and Pastor Wesley Smith at that time, who mentored him, and he was able to make a difference in how we worshiped. And that has left a legacy beyond our understanding, because when I visit churches today and simply see the dance, the movement of worship, and how it has transformed the life and the energy of our local fellowships, he definitely had an impact
And
in
that was
world.
seen way back then as being even evil, I'm told, in some quarters, eh?
It was, but God
Don't
has
bring the
proven
dance
over
in
the
the
years
church.
that it was him who was operating.
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. Pastor Pat,
Yes.
what is your story and your legacy? How did you come into BFM?
Well, I started in 1982. Adeline, at the time, my wife, was pregnant with our first child. And one of my cousins came to me and she said, you guys have to go with us and hear this guy teach about the Word of God. And there was some pushback because traditionally Baptists, we were like, yeah, well, you know, we grew up in this, so we don't need anything new. And I could remember that the Friday night when we got there, he was teaching on
And you're talking about
Dr. Monroe. His topic was Caught with a Catch. And I remembered it because here was this little short guy,
fella.
speaking with so much authority, and not only speaking with so much authority, but being able to go to the Word and show you in the Word that what he was saying was not a fable. It was God, actual words that we sat in churches for years and never understood. And that had an impact on me. And I said to my wife that night, you know, I don't think I'm going back to my church. And
That same night?
That same night. And I said, I got to find a way to say to my pastor that I'm going to start going to another church. Well, of course.
You were caught with a catch.
I was caught with a catch. And it was significant because I remember the night when we went home, we literally sat up in the Bible, sat up in the bed, and we went through every single scripture that he had spoken about to make sure he was actually telling us what he was saying, because he was going so fast. And we went through and we stayed up the entire night just going through the Word. And it had such an impact on us. I think both of us went back to our several churches once. I spoke with my senior pastor then at the time and told him what I was going through. And then we actually, to make a long story short, started coming to Bahamas Faith Ministry. And that was 1982. And we've been there ever since.
Wonderful. And both of your children's, your family obviously, and your children have been significantly impacted by the ministry. They're all raised in the ministry.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Interesting that you convinced your wife and she convinced her husband. and both of them, of course, served in significant capacity.
Yes.
It was the foundational stage of the ministry.
Yes.
It was. One of the other things that at least that caught us was he was the first person I saw who spoke about a vision that he had, not so much for himself, but for his people. How can I impart this vision that is really my vision, but belongs to everybody? How can I get followers to become leaders, and understanding that every provision that God has for me, it is also there for them? How can they grab a hold of that? And I think when we look around at the Bahamas, when we look at all the ministries in the Bahamas, we see that the impact that his vision had is still affecting the churches now.
Yes, and I would totally agree with you. He was a visionary leader, and it was the vision that drove him, but it also drove those who submitted to his authority at that particular time. And that vision really engulfed us in growing and understanding and desiring and wanting more of God's presence in our life. And that we transferred to our children, basically deposited in our children, which basically gravitated them to want to make a commitment to even take a more of a leadership role in everything that they did. And my late husband, one of the things, he knew that he was a leader. He always knew that there was so much more to give. And so through the teaching, which was so vibrant and real and simple, and that was one of the things as well. It was not complicated, even to this day under our present leadership. The teaching is simply simple, and so people could apply, and that's what we wanted. We wanted the simplicity of the gospel and understanding the impact of the kingdom of God in our personal lives, so that we can influence those who our worlds, which we were placed in, and influence them into a relationship with God. So it was the simplicity of the gospel and the teaching, the purity of the teaching, that you could go home and you could research it. You could then share it, because out of it, we also had, even before what became known as cell groups, we had small fellowships meetings on Sunday afternoon with our friends and with our neighbors who came to our house, and we just sat after lunch and just shared and researched. So we were able to grow. And that's what I think one of the things that the ministry wanted as well.
Having said that, what is it, Pastor Pat Rowe, that the ministries throughout the country have missed that Bahamas Faith Ministries caught onto, and the vision of the ministry that made it so impactful, quickly as we get ready to wrap up?
I think what it was that when you came to Bahamas, there was always a lot of stories floating around about what quote-unquote Bahamas Faith Ministry is. And I think what they missed was everything that Dr. Monroe and Pastor Richard Pinder had belonged to everybody. Whatever they did it not for notoriety. They did it not because they wanted someone to think they're special. I mean, even when Dr. Monroe and Dr. Pinder wrote their books, they made a point to ensure that everything that they've written is not just for them, but if they leave this for us. I think what churches miss sometimes is because it's fine that I want to be a leader of a church, but my leadership should flow down to my congregation. And if I'm leading, if I'm the only person in the pulpit with knowledge and it's not getting to my congregation, then I will continue to have followers.
Okay.
All right.
Pastor Bethel, Cipriana Bethel, you get the last word today in this segment. Tell the country, what do you see? Is this Bahamas Faith Ministries still relevant in the 21st century? It was impactful in the 90s, significantly impactful, and moving beyond that but some would say, is that message and that method and the church today still are relevant? We have so many dynamic ministries in the country now as opposed to when you started. Is it still relevant?
Oh, it certainly is very much relevant, because we have seen the transference of the vision in the lives of our present leaders, who are now taking another group of persons to another level of leadership. It is very relevant. We have a very strong following. We may be attracting persons a little younger, and that's because of the present leadership having come out of youth ministries. But it's very, very relevant because we deal with the issues of the day, the practicality of applying kingdom principles to living a successful life. And so the teaching is as powerful as it was then. It's just as powerful today. And we ultimately are creating leaders, not today, not just for today. We're creating future leaders, strong leaders who will continue to have an impact on this society, but also we're now even just beyond the Bahamas. We are global. And those leaders are now living in other countries, not just the Bahamas, they're all over the world and impacting the world that God has called them to. So it's very relevant, it's going nowhere, and it will continue to have an impact in creating leaders for this nation.
I'm almost tempted to ask you if BFM did that. You're watching Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and we are here today continuing a very, very interesting but a very relevant conversation about the impact of Bahamas Faith Ministries on the Bahamas. And we have two pastors from the ministry who have been impactful to that ministry, and I think even from its very, very early days joined the ministry, and they're here to share their stories on how they became a part of the ministry and the impact on them, and also to talk a little bit. So I want to introduce in this segment of the program, first of all, Pastor Jay Mullins. Pastor Jay, welcome to Nation Building.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
to
for
be
coming.
here.
Pastor Alan Monroe.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. When I first met Pastor Alan, I thought he was the brother of Dr. Miles Monroe.
Yeah.
Pastor Alan, let's start with you, and then we'll come to Pastor Jay. Just in brief, what brought you to BFM, and what impact has the ministry had on your life, your family?
What brought me to BFM was I was in a former church, and
Everybody was in a
I was invited, and it took me a while to process the timing of going. I eventually went, and from that first visit, like they say, the rest is history.
Okay, so you just took a while to go.
Right.
Once you go, you got caught too.
I got caught. I never returned. But it was a very, very, very different experience from the church setting that I came out of. And the teaching of the word, the ministry of praise and worship, the love ministry with the greeters, everything was just a totally different experience. In fact, with me being asked to go and visit BFM in the hotel, I said, is this a Bahamian thing?
Church in a hotel.
Church in the hotel? Never heard of that, in my upgrowing. And so I said, boy, I got to think about this some. And I did thought of it. Is there any foreign affiliation and support being given to this ministry? Is it all Bahamian? There was just a whole group of questions that kind of flooded my mind, and was processing whether this was really a Bahamian entity that was really being established in the Bahamas that was different. And so when I went and I visited, the experience was just a wonderful, wonderful, life-changing experience for me. And after I visited the first time, I said, you know what? This is what I feel in my heart that the Lord probably wanted me to be a part of. And my background is technical, and so I said, I think I can enhance and provide support in this area of the ministry. And of course, at the time, Pastor Wesley Smith, who served in the ministry over the years, he was the person overseeing the technical area, and he also served in the music ministry as well. And so we spoke as I visited from time to time, and kind of got a little bit more understanding and appreciation for the work of the ministry. And eventually I began to serve and support in the technical area of the ministry.
And you continue to serve in that capacity or in a different capacity today?
I continue to serve, but then my service and my support expanded. I served initially in the technical area, and then of course it spilled over and I began to serve in the pastoral staff.
Administratively?
Yes, in the ministry as well.
And so your current position in the ministry today is?
I am the assistant pastor of the church. I still oversee the technical area of the ministry, just from an administrative standpoint, but I serve really strongly in the support of the church fellowship.
Administrative. So you would be the assistant to Pastor Kirsch Dalville?
That is correct.
Good.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Now to Pastor Jay, who is the senior man. I struggled when we were preparing. Isn't Pastor Jay? Aren't you one of the foundational pastors of the church? Are you?
Yes, I am. But as you heard Pastor Dave might have said, it was just those four at the very beginning. I got to be introduced to Dr. Miles Monroe at Golden Gates Assembly Church, where I was a member in the body of Christ.
So everybody came from some church?
Yes.
So Dr. Monroe took away the people?
No.
That wasn't his intention, I'm sure, but
of course,
everybody
of course
left.
not.
Go
But
ahead.
you see, it was God who orchestrated this, the whole thing, really. Because I met him and I was introduced to him as a person who loved to go fishing. And he was one of those people who liked fishing. So the pastor of the church introduced him to me. But he came to the church to do a prayer seminar. And that was the first time in my life, on all my search, that I heard the scriptures being, explained so simply. And he got my attention. And when he left, finished the seminar and left, I went to my pastor and I told him. Of course, I was new to the church. It wasn't a year yet that I was saved and entered this church. And I told my pastor, I said, listen, I want to grow in the Word. And I just heard a person who I think will help me with that, so I'm going to go with Dr. Miles Monroe.
So you literally left after he left?
Yes.
But how did your pastor take that?
Well, we continue to be friends through the years. Up to this day, we are still friends. It was.
But initially?
Initially, I guess he considered it because of the fact that I was in the church not quite a year, and he tried to make me a deacon because of my character, I guess. I don't. But I turned it down because of the fact that I knew I hardly knew anything about the Word, because I just got saved, not even a year. So, you know, he probably was a little disappointed that I left. But I went, and they were still at the wash house.
So that was the infancy stage, for sure.
Yes, they were still at the wash house. And this was at the ending part of 1980. And we were there for about, I think it was 3 weeks or so, and then we moved to Bay Street, to the Central Furniture Building on Bay Street. And that is when Dr. Monroe approached me and said, listen, I've been watching you over the past couple of weeks and couple of months, and the Lord told me that you are going to be one of my leaders.
Just like that?
Of course. You know, I asked him if he was joking. At the time, I was a police officer with
Royal Bahamas Police Force.
Police Force in the CID investigation department. And I said to him, listen, you sure you heard from the Lord? I said, because I never went to no high school and I never went to college. Nothing like that. And Dr. Monroe said to me, he said, you see this book? Meaning the Bible. He said, this is the greatest teacher. This is all you need, and you're going to be okay. And that's how it happened. Well, it went on, and we moved from Bay Street and went to Balmoral Beach Hotel, where, well, let me go back here a little bit. At Bay Street, I started recording all the messages that Dr. Monroe was teaching every Friday night.
Audio or video?
Audio. And with a little boom box. When he started to speak, I just put the boom box right by his time. And he noticed it. And he got a tape machine that could produce one tape at a time.
Those cassette tapes back
Yes, yes. And I started doing that. People started buying the tape. I had to take orders and prepare them during the week for the next Friday, so when the people come, they have their tape. And then we moved to Balmoral.
Innovation.
Yes.
At the time.
And we moved to Balmoral Beach. And Dr. Monroe said to me, listen, I want you to develop a tape ministry. Of course, that was foreign to the Bahamas. No church has ever done that before then. And I said to him, I don't know anything of it, you got to show me what to do. Well, watch the wisdom of God here. Dr. Monroe arranged for us to go to Tulsa. He took me to Tulsa, introduced me to T.L. Osborne Ministry, Kenneth Hagin Ministry, Oral Roberts Ministry, and another ministry at the time was called Faith Christian Center, which was in North Tulsa. And he introduced me to them. And they showed me their tape department and how they operate and how they made all the tapes and all that kind of stuff and put them together in packages and everything. And I came back to the Bahamas in Bahamas Faith Ministry and started working on a tape ministry. I was, at the time, still a police officer working in CID. So there was times like 2, 3 o'clock in the mornings, I was down at the Balmoral Beach in this little room preparing people tape for the following Friday. And that's the way that started ministry. And then let me tell you one little short story. We were in Tulsa a couple of years later at Carlton Pearson Church. Oral Roberts walks in the church by himself, came up and sat in the second row while Miles was teaching. And then he never do that. He always had a driver and somebody with him. After church, we met in Carlton office, and Oral Roberts said to Miles, I came to find out when are you going back home? And Miles told him, we going tomorrow morning. And he said, cancel your flight, I'm going to take you. He took us.
Took you back to Nassau?
Took us back. He only took us as far as Palm Beach because he was not prepared. The pilot was not cleared to come into Nassau. But what the purpose of the trip was, he wanted to talk to Miles. He wanted to make Dr. Monroe president of the university.
And that's Oral Roberts University in the
Yes.
U.S. And because we're running out of time, why did that not happen?
That's what I wanted to reach to. It didn't happen because, and it caused me to realize the vision was real. Dr. Monroe said to him, I appreciate the offer, but I can't do it. I have to go back home to my people because I have a vision for my people.
Pastor. Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and today we are talking religion. Well, we're talking about spiritual growth and development of the country, and specifically we're talking about the history of Bahamas Faith Ministries International, its impact on the Bahamas, and of course in this segment we're talking to a very, very significant founding member of Bahamas Faith Ministries International. She is Pastor Sheena Pinder, who of course is the wife of the late Dr. Richard Pinder. Pastor Sheena, welcome to Nation Building.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. And of course, Pastor Sheena Pinder has been faithful in supporting her husband over 30 years in ministry. And through the journey of Bahamas Faith Ministries International, she's been there as a pillar of strength to, not just a pillar of strength to her husband, but to the ministry as a whole, and been a part of its leadership team. So there's no more fitting person that I know that can speak to how Bahamas Faith Ministry got started, your recollection of it, and also to tell our viewers in the Bahamas how you and your late sister end up being married to the founder, to the president and vice president of BFM.
Oh, wow. Well, very briefly, I'll just like to say that I got saved as a teenager, and of course, my sister Ruth and Dr. Monroe were dating, and the Visionaires was a very instrumental group as far as spiritual growth and spiritual excitement in the country at the time. And so I joined her in going around New Providence anyway, with the group, all of their singing assignments, and being a part of that. Very excited about the Lord, very excited about what the vision is.
To be clear, you weren't singing,
doing.
right?
I wasn't singing, no. I actually went because, of course, with her and Pastor Miles dating, he up on the stage singing, she would have to be sitting by herself. So I had to go to keep her company, whether I wanted to or not. I had to go to keep her company. And so that's how my excitement about the Lord and what Pastor Miles was doing and all of that in the country. And at the end of one of those concerts, after he had started Oral Roberts University, the first semester after that, he introduced me to his new friend that he met at Oral Roberts University, which happened to be Pastor Richard. They left Nassau at Christmas, they went back to school, and Pastor Richard and I started corresponding to each other. And that is really how our relationship began. Just corresponding, talking as friends, telling me about himself, and then we would come home during the summer. So the entire time of our dating, he was in college, either at ORU or University of Kentucky. But we were dating all through his college years, and that relationship grew, of course. And then I started hearing about this vision, about all of the talks he and Pastor Miles had at school, because I didn't know about any of this before. And then when we started getting serious about each other, he started sharing with me about the vision that Pastor Miles was sharing with him, and about coming back home and starting something. I don't think it was articulated as a church at the time. It was just doing something. They knew that they had to do something to impact the country on a spiritual level. And we were very excited, very young, very excited about it. I was 22 years old when Bahamas Faith Ministries started. And I remember the excitement that we started
adding those
with.
numbers
Yes.
of years don't reflect how you look at all.
Why, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I was 22 years old, and very excited and serious about God, wanting to grow in the Lord, wanting to see so many things that I couldn't articulate at the time. I only knew that the excitement was there to just do things for the Lord, to just grow in the Lord.
So specific. All right. So you've shared basically, because I know we have a limited time. You've shared the love affair, how the couples got together, and then of course they came back home and you all got started.
Yes.
In a minute, how precisely though did the formation of the church occur, and the 4 or 5 men or couples that came together?
Well, when we started, we came together as a group, Pastor Miles, Pastor Ruth, Pastor Richard, and myself, Pastor Henry and Sheila, Pastor
Francis.
Dave, Pastor Henry and Sheila Francis, Pastor Dave Burrows, who was not married at the time. And we started just meeting together, talking about the vision, and then we started meeting together just for prayer. Because from the beginning, I think, God helped us to realize that if we were going to make an impact, then we had to grow together as a team. Mm-hmm. Because team building and the strength of the team was what was going to carry the vision forward. So we spent a lot of time together, fellowshipping, praying together.
And what, talking about that team, I know the mission went on and evolved and developed into what the dynamic ministry became, but what was the key in bonding the team and keeping that team together for over 30 years?
I think it was the amount of time that we spent together in fellowship, in prayer, and in getting to know each other, getting to know our families. We spent a lot of time together. We would have Sunday meals after service. We would have Sunday meal on Saturdays. We would go out. We spent a lot of time in fellowship with each other, getting to know each other.
Now, Pastor Sheena, that's all well and good hearing that. Sounds very nice. But I know women, and I know women always have differences. Even if the brothers get along fairly well and good, women are unique. You all are special. And so what was the key, you think, in the women in the family, in those families?
Well, I don't think there was, I mean, in our instance, we all got along very well from the beginning. I can't think of instances where
you had to put up with somebody,
where I just put up with someone just to put up with them.
So you think the secret was the building that fellowship,
the relationship,
yes, through spending quality time?
I think that was the secret for us.
And do you think that secret, that is a tool that can be used to unite any grouping of people, the quality time they spend together?
Yes, it's based on relationship.
Now, I have to jump along and hasten because of time and talk about the not so nice days. And unfortunately, in 2014, we all know and the country knew it was a time of mourning for not just the country but the world when that unfortunate accident in Grand Bahama in the plane crash. And so my question for you is, for the benefit of people in our country who have faced misfortune and challenging tragic situation, wanted you to take a minute or two and just to share under such circumstances, what was the secret to you managing over the last several years and coping making it through to presenting, sitting here today and just looking at you, you wouldn't recognize that there was a great loss in your life. You've really handled this as great as anybody I know. So what was the secret to doing that?
The secret for me is a strong relationship with God. Like I said, I became a Christian and gave my life to the Lord as a teenager. From the time I gave my life to the Lord, Pastor Ruth, Pastor Miles, Pastor Richard were all a part of that. They were part of my growth, a part of my development in the Lord. So I grew spiritually and in every other way with them in my life as a team, us as a team, moving together in ministry. They were part of my life. They were family. They were in my private life. There wasn't a life that I had apart from them. So in 2014, the devastation was great. And without the Lord, I would not have made it, because He helped me to refocus on Him as opposed to refocus on what I had lost, and on myself, and grieving and thinking about me and what I had lost. He helped me to refocus on Him and who He was to me and my relationship with Him, and the fact that I might have lost, yes, but He was still there. He was still the reason for me being here, and I still had Him to help me go through it. Mind you, I still had and still do have those very bad days when I want to have a pity party, because I think I deserve to have a pity party. You know, I think I deserve to have a day when I just sit down and mope and moan. But the Lord, He never allows that to happen. He always has someone to call me, someone to send me an email or WhatsApp or whatever, someone to come by to just encourage me in the Lord. And that is what He has been doing. And I think it is mainly because I had a relationship with Him, a firm, serious relationship with Him long before 2014. So you cannot wait until the crisis happens before you start getting a relationship with the Lord. It's too late then. You need to be in that relationship.
And before just for history and the record, at any point in that planning of that trip, were you scheduled to be a part of that trip? To Freeport.
To Freeport.
Yes.
Well, I, as one of the coordinators for the conference, I would always have to go down ahead to make sure that everything is set up and all of that. And so initially, we were all scheduled to go down on the Saturday, and then plans were changed, and the entire staff was going down on Sunday. So I knew I had to go ahead of time.
So you were never scheduled?
So I was never scheduled to stay behind.
The last question I have for you is, you are the sole survivor of the couple, the president and vice president, and that initial team. And I know there are others, Pastor Dave, who's now the president, who started, but their children, I think 4 kids, the adult children,
Yes.
of the couples that led the ministry that was left. And I think one of and this is something I heard from several people in those difficult days, that you were the strongest person that God could have chosen to have been left to steady the family, if you will. Was that true, really?
Well,
and how are you managing, and even to now, to continue to provide
I don't
support?
know that I was the strongest one. All I know that I was the one that was left. That the Lord took those 3 home. He left me with my 2 kids, and with Pastor Miles and Pastor Ruth kids. The good part about that, and the part that I see is so strategic, is that from Charissa and Chiro Monroe were infants. I have been a part of their life from the time they were born. Richard and I were recognized even by their parents as guardians to them when they traveled to be here.
Which
we took them to school and to take care of them. And so my role in their life has always been right there, almost like a guardian to them. So in 2014, when that happened, need or the responsibility of just surrounding
just a
them was just a
continuation.
continuation,
It's a
and
natural
it was
process.
just a natural
And
process.
so, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with
My
the viewers
pleasure.
in the Bahamas.
My
On
pleasure.
behalf of all of us at Nation Building, it certainly has been a great opportunity to present this to you today. And stay tuned for the next edition right here on Nation Building. Have a great week.